Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk Education. Dr. Heldman here. How you doing? We're in early September now. Kids have gone back to school. In a previous video I uploaded just a while ago, I talked about different command prompts, different CLIs, if you will. There's the Windows command prompt, and then there's PowerShell, and then of course there's Terminal for the Mac and for Linux. I wanted to go over just a handful of commands on how to use these different shells or terminals, or CLIs, if you will, whatever you want to call them. There are different commands for different terminals, and so it's good to know them. It's good to know how they work. And so let's get started. This should be very informative and a lot of fun. Okay, now if you're running Windows 11, which is great, they've done a lot of good work in consolidating these command line interfaces. So you can have the command prompt plus PowerShell running. Let me show you what you're going to do. So first of all, you're going to click the search, the magnifying tool here, and type in CMD. You'll find the command prompt. You can run it as administrator. In our case, we don't need to. I'm just going to run it locally, even though I am administrator, and I'll bring it over here. Now you notice here that they've added the ability to add tabs to this thing. So this is Windows 11, and I'm looking at the command prompt, which is what it's named right here. But if I added something here, I can click the plus button here, and I could change that to a different type of window. If I go in here and click down, I could open Windows PowerShell, the command prompt. I could open an Azure Cloud Shell. If you install Visual Studio, you get a command prompt with Visual Studio. It's called the Developer Command Prompt. There's also a PowerShell for Visual Studio. And then I can go into Settings. Now under Settings, it's very interesting. There's some interesting things that you might want to pay attention to here. If I go to Defaults, I can look at the starting directory and see where it's going to go. I can go down here and look at the tab titles. I could change this tab title if I wanted to, or the icon or whatever. So that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. There's a lot of stuff to do. I'm going to discard the changes here. And then under Advanced, you can do some other work here, like you could suppress the bell or suppress title changes, text anti-aliasing things. It's gotten very, very sophisticated, I guess, is what I'm trying to show. On startup here, you can see that it's going to use the default profile. In my case, it's the command prompt, but I could set it so that the default was PowerShell instead. The default terminal application, let's see, I'll discard changes. Go to startup. Default terminal application, I'm going to let Windows decide, launch on machine startup. I usually leave that off. I don't like stuff starting when I really boot the computer. And you get the idea. So you have all kinds of stuff. I go down through here, interaction. These are my word delimiters. I can do it in plain text is what I usually choose to do. Detect URLs and make them clickable. I'm not a big fan of that. I'll leave that alone for now. You might like it. Automatically focus pane on mouse hover. That might be something that's interesting to have. Under Appearance, you can change the language. You can change the theme from dark to light to Windows theme. Position of newly created tabs, discard changes. Hide the title bar, always show tabs. I don't know what this acrylic material in the tab row is. That sounds pretty interesting to me. So what is it going to make it shiny? I don't know if that's important or not to you. And then under color schemes, you have a bunch of different schemes you can pick from. So if you're like me and you're red-green colorblind, you might pick a different theme that's a little more helpful to you. Under rendering, what it's going to do when it redraws things. Under actions, you have a bunch of speed keys that you could print out, and I'm sure you can memorize those. That would be very helpful. And then under command prompt, one of the things I wanted to show you is that you see here I have %user profile. That's in all caps, %. This is called an environment variable. And so the idea is that Windows keeps track of certain settings, and there are tons and tons of these environment variables. For example, here is %system root. Well, what does that mean? That's where the Windows files are installed. System32 folder command.exe. So what it's doing is it's calling this command prompt here, command.exe. It's finding it inside system root system32. Now, why is this in percent signs? Well, environment variables are meant to sort of neutralize, like if you pick a different folder name for where you install Windows, it's still going to show up in %system root. So it's a way of making things generic. So it says, where is Windows installed? Oh, it's in system root, %system root, %. Now, you don't need these caps. It can be lowercase, proper case, uppercase, it doesn't matter. But the main point is %sign name means that that is a environment variable, and you can reference those when you're writing scripts and things like that. Okay, now I've got the command up here. I'm going to close the settings window, and here I am. I'm going to clear the screen. Now, when you're in the command prompt, the Windows command prompt to clear the screen is CLS, clear screen. So I'm going to hit that, and sure enough, it clears the screen just nicely for me. Let's go over here and let's grab a PowerShell prompt here. And now what I'm going to do is I want to clear the screen. I don't think I can use CLS. Let's try it. It works fine. So if I was accustomed to using command prompt commands, that would work fine. But in this case, I could use CLS, or let me do a dir here and let me do a clear. It obeys the Linux commands as well. So CLS and clear, Linux clear command, are both going to work inside PowerShell. Okay, let's learn another command that's very popular, very powerful. You can see here that I'm in the :users wheld folder or wheld directory. When I installed this computer, the OS decided to give me this name. I'm not a big fan of that name for the folder, but it's a pain to change it, so I'm going to leave it alone. However, what if I wanted to see what was inside this particular folder? Now, we know that the command in Linux is ls, list structure, but it won't work here. If I type in ls here, it doesn't know what that means. To look at what's inside a directory inside Windows command prompt, you type in dir, it stands for directory, and you get an output that's a little bit different. It looks different than Linux. It's kind of similar, but not really. You can scroll here. There's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, you have a dot and a dot folder. These are folders because it says dir here. It stands for directory. This is the date these were created. You can ignore those. They're going to be in every directory you go into. They are there for the purposes of maintaining the file hierarchy structure. You can leave them alone. This dot here means that these are other folders, and I assume that the dot means that they're invisible. And then I have my other folders here as well. Now, it's easy to tell inside a command prompt listing where you have files. So .getconfig here is a file of 192 bytes, and I'm missing this directory nomenclature here, date and time created. So that's the way that it looks here. Now, if I go over to PowerShell, and I'm in the same folder, users wheld, but I have a PowerShell prompt here, and the cursor is flashing, I can do a dir, and it does it just fine for me. However, it points it out in a different sort of way. It's very Linux-like, so you can see that you've got the D for directory, date and time, and then the name of the folder. It's not color-coded like Linux, but it is obeying the Linux command infrastructure. So that's a key change from the command prompt to Windows PowerShell. Now, it didn't used to be this way. For a long time, Microsoft was not in the Linux business. They didn't want to do anything with Linux, and now they do. And so a lot of this is very, very much obeying Linux commands. So that works fine. If I clear the screen with CLEAR, I can also type in ls, and it works just fine. Let's see if ls-tac-l works. Nope, ls-tac-l won't work. Why? Well, because when you type in ls, it presents it in long format anyway. How can I do ls tac a? Nope, no good. Now, these are called commandlets. And so what's happening here, this thing get child item is a commandlet, and it's saying, I don't know what this tac a is. It's ambiguous to me, and it's giving me an error. It doesn't understand that. So that is something that's going to really trip you up when you're working with PowerShell versus Linux. So you'll get accustomed to all of these Linux commands, and then you'll find that if you go over to PowerShell, the command isn't going to work quite correctly. Let's go back to the command prompt and do another couple. So I'm going to clear the screen, CLS. Suppose that I want to make a folder here. So I'm going to make a temporary folder. I'm going to call it, I'm going to use the command make dir, make directory. That's the old Windows command prompt command, make dir. And I'm just going to call this bill_temp, like so. And it's already out there. If I wanted to change into that command, into that folder here, I could do a cd space. CD is recognized by Linux, by PowerShell, and by the command prompt. It's one of few commands that match across all three of the different terminal environments. So I can cd into bill_temp, and you can see now the PowerShell is color coding things for me so that I can see the command that I've issued plus what I want to do, and there we are, we're inside bill_temp. Here, if I want to change directory, I do the same thing, cd space bill_temp, like so. Okay, now, suppose that I want to create a file in here. You know that if I'm in Linux, I can use touch. Let's see if touch will work here. So I will touch hello world.txt. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this .text on here because Windows can get a little fussy with these extensions. These are called an extension. Used to be back in the day, you only had 3-letter extensions. Today you can have 4 or even 5-letter extensions, so they've modified that a little bit. And the extension, the idea behind the extension is it gives away the idea of what this file does. In this case it's a text, but you'll see such extensions as CMD for command, MSI for Microsoft installer, BAT for batch file, etc. So I'm going to leave the extension on here because it's easier in Windows if I see that extension sitting out there. Let's see if touch works. Hit enter. It doesn't know what touch is. Well, so how do we do that? So the way that you do that is you type in notepad. So I'm going to invoke notepad. What this is doing is invoking the notepad executable, and I'm going to tell it that I want to write hello world, like that. And it'll work in either case. I'm going to put a .text on there. And notepad comes over. Here it is right here. I had to drag it over from my other screen. I'm just going to dock it here. And you can see that notepad's here, and I can say, hello world, how are you today? And then I can do a file save, and that'll save that file. Let me minimize that. So the same thing will work in PowerShell. So we just use a notepad, and then I'm going to say hello world .text, like so. And it'll bring it up and show me that I've put a line in here. I will come down and say my zinnias are looking terrific today. They really are. They're really growing well. And you can always do a Control S. The speed keys are the same throughout Windows, and for the most of Linux, really. Control S is save, O is open, N is new, and you get the idea. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. I could do a Control S instead. And it's brought it up twice now because I invoked it out of PowerShell, and then this is the one that I invoked out of the command prompt. Okay, so that is how to invoke an editor. It is possible to install Nano. I don't think you need it. I think it's using Notepad is just fine. So we used mkdir to make a directory, and then we used Notepad to make a file. Now what happens if I want to get rid of this file? Well, the command to get rid of a file in Windows Command Prompt is del, delete. And so we're going to delete hello world.txt like this. Boom, and it's gone. And if I do a dir for it, so if I look for hello star and hit enter, it's not there anymore. And you can use the same thing over here. You could do a dir to see if there's anything in there. There's nothing in there. So that is working great. So those are some commands that we can use. Now let me back up. I want to show you how you back up one folder. It's the same in Linux, but just the tiniest little bit different. So to back up one folder in the command prompter in PowerShell is cd ... like that. cd ... let me see if this works in PowerShell. Let's do a cd no space ... see if it works. It works fine. In Linux, you have to do a cd space ... So there's only a slight little difference between the two. cd space ... in Linux, cd ... will work fine in both Windows Command Prompt and in PowerShell. Let me clear the screen, CLS. Now, how do I remove that directory? Well, if makedir makes a directory, removedir, rmdir, removes a directory, and I think I called it build temp, like so. Boom. Oh, being used by another process. That's because I have Notepad open. Okay, I went out and closed Notepad. I'll hit my up arrow. By the way, the command buffer works just fine in the Windows Command Prompt and in PowerShell. You can hit your up and down arrows just like you can on Linux. And I've got that removed. And if I do a dir here for Bill Star, there's nothing there. Now let's talk about this wildcard nomenclature. So there's two. There's a star, which means all. So when I say dir Bill Star, it's saying give me everything that starts with Bill, and I don't care what happens after that. And the extension doesn't matter. It'll just display everything. If I said, well, I want to look for anything that starts with B, and I don't care what letter comes after it, I could do a dir B question mark LL star. What that is saying is if it's Bell or Bill or Ball, it's not going to matter because the question mark is grabbing just one character and then the star is grabbing everything else. So that will work just fine. Okay, so let's recreate this build temp here. So I'm going to make dir bill underscore temp. Let's just, for giggles and hoots, I'm going to make this. There it is. There's build temp. It's telling me when it was created, date and time, and so forth. And the D here means that it's a directory. Notice here that it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bits. We're not quite as bent out of shape about the other bits that you might find in Linux. Here it's just the 6 bits that we have to worry about, and the D means that it's a directory. Now I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to do rmdir bill underscore temp. So it is obeying the Windows Command Prompt commands. Let's recreate this. So make dir bill underscore temp. Let's try this. Clear the screen, CLS. Clear works as well in PowerShell, so it can get very confusing. And I'm just going to do a remove bill underscore temp. Let's see if that'll work. Yep, it works just fine. Why? Well, because remove in Linux, if you remove a folder or directory and the directory is empty, it will remove that directory right away. So the remove command is a Linux command that works in PowerShell. So you can use rmdir, you can use rm either way. And let me do a help on RM, by the way. It is not the man page. If you typed in man RM, I think it'll fail. Oh, it gives me a man page, so that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. And if I go up here, it's remove an item. And you've got the more key down here. So spacebar gets you another page at a time, like that. And here's my aliases. So I could use RI, RM, rmdir, del, erase, and RD. And then here's some other info. So I can't put RM tac E like I wanted to do. Like if I said RM tac E bill underscore temp. Excuse me, it's not a tac E, it's a tac R. What that does in Linux is it'll remove all of the files out of the directory and then remove the directory. I love that capability because it's difficult to get it to do that in Windows or in PowerShell, but that TAC-R isn't going to work for me here. It doesn't like that TAC-R. In fact, it doesn't like build temp. Is build temp out there? Dir build star. It's not out there. Let's make it again. So make dir build underscore temp. Clear the screen. Remove build underscore. I'm going to do remove TAC-R build underscore temp. And it seemed to work just fine. So everything's cool. If there were files in there, let's do that. Let's make dir build underscore temp. Let's change to build underscore temp. Let's do a notepad. Hello world. Text. I'll bring this over here so you can see it. It likes to make it on the left-hand side of my monitor here. So I'll just drag this up here. I'll say, how are you today? I'll do a file save and then close this. Okay, so if I do a clear screen in here, CLS, if I do a dir, it shows that I've got hello world.txt in here and it's 18 characters long. I'll clear the screen. I'll do a remove TAC-R, build underscore, oops, I've got to go back one folder, build, cd dot dot, remove TAC-R build underscore temp, and it works just fine. And if I do a dir build star, it's all gone. So the trick with PowerShell is it'll obey most of the Windows command prompt commands. So if you know those, you can use those here. B, it will obey its own commands. These are called commandlets, and they're usually long. So there's a lot of typing with PowerShell, and those commands are case sensitive. Even though the rest of Windows is not case sensitive, for some reason the commandlets are. And then, if you know Linux commands, most of the time PowerShell will play in the sandbox with Linux commands, which is really cool. So if you're very accustomed to Linux, you can get into Windows and use most of the commands using PowerShell. Why is this helpful? Well, if I download Windows Server 2022, which is the latest and greatest version, you have two ways that you can install it. So you can install it with the GUI, or you can install it so that it's in native PowerShell mode and everything you do is done using PowerShell and other types of commands. So there's no GUI to help you out, no buttons to click, nothing like that. It's all command driven. And so you have the choice of the two now. Let's go in and do another couple of commands here. Okay, a couple of other real quick commands. So over here in Windows, I'm going to clear the screen with a CLS, and the command to see your IP configuration information is ipconfig. You might get used to ifconfig, or you might get used to IP space A, but you are not going to use ifconfig inside the Windows command prompt. It is ipconfig right there. And so you can see this showing my Ethernet adapter. Ethernet shows me my IP addresses. Here's my second Ethernet adapter, and so on. Now let's see if that works in PowerShell. So I can type in ipconfig, and sure enough, it does the same thing, like so. Clear the screen. Can I use ifconfig? No, I cannot. Can I use IPA? No, I cannot. So it could be that you can install these things, but by default, PowerShell does not know about anything apart from ipconfig. So if I type in ipconfig, it'll show me all of my IP configuration information, just as happy as a clam. There we go. Really cool. Nothing to it. Another new cool command prompt command is systeminfo. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Systeminfo. And it does exactly what you think it does. It's generating information about your particular system. So you get a lot of cool information here about the system. And here, if I clear the screen, I type in systeminfo. It does exactly the same thing. So PowerShell and the command prompt work exactly the same way. I might make this full screen so it's a little bit easier to see. Clear the screen with a CLS. Let's look at a couple of others. Okay, so there is a ping command. Ping is universal, so it's good for Windows, for PowerShell, Windows command prompt, and for Linux. Let's ping a host. Let's ping Microsoft.com and see if that works here in PowerShell. It works just great in PowerShell. Command prompt, if I clear the screen, I do a ping Windows.com. It'll ping that way as well, so that looks really good. It works that way in Linux as well. There is a command for looking at the date and time. So clear the screen, date. Type in the word date and hit enter. This allows you to set the date. Back when we had the Y2K problem, when the machines, we were worried that they were going to reset because we had just turned over to the year 2000, and a lot of the clocks were set to freak out after 1999. They didn't know what to do about it. That was probably the world's best managed project management process, because all over the world everybody was freaking out about Y2K and the machines dying because they turned over. So one way that we discovered that we could get around it if we had a problem was we could just use the date command and change it back before the year 2000. So date's pretty useful. There's also one called time, and that's useful. If I go to PowerShell, clear the screen, CLS or clear works as well. Quite a few of the Linux commands work in PowerShell. I do a date, there it is, but it doesn't allow me to adjust the date. And I do time, and it doesn't know about time. So why am I saying this? Well, there's some weird stuff that is going on here with regard to PowerShell. Some stuff's been ported over to Linux world. Some stuff has been created into commandlets that you have to know how to work a specific commandlet. Other stuff obeys the Windows command prompt. So it's kind of a mixed bag with PowerShell, and it's worth your while to learn as much as possible about PowerShell. So I think I've done quite a bit here. I've gone way over the time, and I apologize for that. I'll probably do a third movie where we dig more into some of the more complex commands. I want to go over some basic PowerShell commands with you, as well as some command prompt commands that will be helpful for you. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And y'all have a good day, and I'll talk to you in the next movie.